think the people that we need to be speaking to as a design community is actually CEOs, CTOs, CPOs, CIOs, business leaders, how we can actually implement design. So I want to go and figure out their world and combine these worlds, because I think we're very insular, aren't we?
Hello, I'm Doug Powell. Welcome to This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. Tom Scott is a design recruiter who has placed executive design leaders at some of the top companies in the world. He's founder of talent firm Verified and publisher of the Verified Insights weekly newsletter, which consistently provokes a vigorous and spirited online discussion. Tom is launching a new podcast called Verified Insider, in which he'll be speaking to design leaders and business leaders about the value of design. Tom recently interviewed me for his podcast, and I thought it would be interesting to interview him and to combine those interviews into one episode of This is a Prototype. So in this episode, you're going to hear me interviewing Tom in the first half and Tom interviewing me in the second half. I started my conversation with Tom Scott by asking him about the themes, topics, and patterns he's noticing in the early podcast interviews he's been conducting. And that's where we begin.
What I've found through the interviews actually is the conversations and things people are saying aren't wildly different, just in a different way, different experiences, obviously different companies, but their leadership style is different, but often the same.
What are the top 2 or 3 challenges that you hear from the leaders you're speaking to?
So not coming into the organization in the right part of the organization, and not having a big enough remit to focus on design in an intentional way. And often they're brought in to fix a particular product or a particular service, but not looking at it more holistically. And so they just, to be honest, people just get bored in leadership roles. The other thing as well is like reporting to people who have no idea what they actually do. And then from there, they're not getting the appropriate budgets, the appropriate hiring budgets, training budgets to actually build an A-class team to do cool stuff, because the leader is obviously looking at, managing up a lot in terms of this is the importance of design, this is what we can do, blah, blah, blah. But if they haven't got the team to execute that, these people aren't going to see the results of that. So yeah, having budgets is a big one as well. And then just general buy-in, I think. I think that whole seat at the table is an overused term now. I think it's still apparent in some places. And then reporting lines is definitely an issue. There's a lot of people reporting to CMOs, CTOs. But I think it's different to every organization, right? There's not one right answer to that.
I think the pattern in those different examples that you gave was just the lack of understanding of what we do and the value that we provide. And I think at this stage in the evolution of the work and the practice and the profession, shouldn't we be a little farther along in that understanding?
I think there's a lot of talk in the industry about designers need business acumen, but business leaders need design acumen as well. And as recruiters, we are the first to understand when we go to a design leader, what is the design acumen of that business, to really accurately give that design leader a perspective of what they're going into. And then I think we need to really dig into interviews on their design acumen. Are they serious about what they say they're going to do and give in terms of budgets? And for me, one of the biggest red flags when I'm speaking to a company is if they view design as just UI, that's a huge red flag to me. You're missing the whole point of what design can actually bring. You just design processes, you design software, we design
culture.
The culture. Yeah, like Dropbox did. Do you remember they designed their virtual office? Like their design team actually did that, and that affected the whole company culture, which might have affected the retention rates. I'm sure they've got a lot of data on that, and the design team did that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember Alistair Simpson talking a lot about that. So yeah, no, that's always a huge red flag. But yeah,
You were saying a moment ago, and I don't think you finished your thought about that. That one you were reflecting on a 1% idea.
oh yes,
That came from one of your newsletter posts, I think.
yeah, yes. So I'm always thinking about what is the 1% of designers, and for me, is two things. One is authenticity, showing up in a unique way. That's a small thing, but the big thing is having intention. So using your skills and looking at the interconnectedness of life, of the world, but then using design as a medium to create true change. And it's that sort of structured thinking of designers that, for me, I'm like, wow, that's a serious designer, because they're thinking beyond a pixel. They're thinking about using design as a medium to create change with high intention. And that's quite a rare person to come across, actually. You can teach Figma, you can teach UX, you can teach design systems, you can teach the hard skills, but I don't think you can teach that. And that, for me, is what a 1% designer has.
What can you teach and what can't you teach? I would say maybe that is something we can teach, but we don't teach it. You know what I mean? Like, are those qualities that we could transfer, and we just aren't really doing that yet?
Yeah. Do you think that's a symptom of this world we're in, where it's very instant gratification? It's just like churn out, iterate apps and websites and convert customers. And we're not looking at how design is going to affect this business 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, but also customers, the planet, everything, because it doesn't matter right now. It's not going to help our CEO reach their bonus.
The business leaders in these companies not really understanding what value design can bring to them. That's where the disconnect is, because they're thinking, I've got to optimize, I've got to make things as efficient as I can, and yet they're missing this whole opportunity that a great design team and a great design leader or leadership team can bring to their company. Cultural impact, ways of working, the Dropbox example that you mentioned a moment ago. That was not an expectation of the design team. I guarantee you, they weren't charged with redesigning the way that company works, but they did. They did because that's how they think. They think in innovative, human-centered ways.
What I mentioned earlier around, there's a lot of design communities out there. We're talking about all the problems. Yes, we probably got solutions, but how can we, as a community, this is the question I ponder pretty much every day while I'm at work. It's like, how can we be really making change in terms of getting companies to care about design in a thoughtful, meaningful way? And as a result, getting more true design leaders back into work that they genuinely enjoy and love. And it's not just boring churning of work.
I think we're in sore need of stories. The stories of the last 5 years have been about scale, have been about, to a certain degree, kind of fulfilling that dream of optimization and sort of smooth running operationally, sophisticated design programs. By and large, I mean, this is an overstatement, but by and large, we've kind of gotten there, and that story's been told. Now we need a new batch of stories that really begin to address what you're reaching for, which is the broader impact that we can have. And those stories just aren't, I'm not hearing them. It doesn't sound like you're hearing them either.
No, because what I'm hearing is the same old problems, not enough buy-in, not enough budget, not enough team, especially now in a bit of a winter economy. It's all about efficiency. It's all about survival. We're seeing a lot of companies like, there was one recently backed by Bezos and Gates. It was like a transporting company, had 800 million funding, just gone bust. WeWork is about to go. And it's all about survival of these companies. So when designers talking about future visions and concepts, and it's like, in a CEO's mind, it can't connect with that right now because he cares about how we're going to get there. Designers need to have pragmatic, what can we do for the business, but then also create those stories of the wider impact, right? And so it's nice balance.
Right. I think of Airbnb as maybe an anomaly, maybe a case where that broader impact is happening and they're starting to tell that story. Do you see any hints of that from that particular company?
So yeah, Airbnb is rare. Everyone talks about being like Airbnb, but why do you think?
The obvious differentiator is that Brian and Joe, the founders, they're designers.
Yeah.
What we were describing a moment ago in having to
what I've found
train these business leaders on the value of design, you don't have to do that at Airbnb because Brian and Joe, they understand it instinctively. I know one of the other themes that you've picked up on and written about, posted about frequently, is that migration of design leaders over to the product side of businesses, primarily tech businesses. What's your point of view on that? What are you seeing?
This is my opinion. I think a lot of design leaders can do product roles, but I don't think product people can do design roles. Product often has more weight in an organization than design. So that if I'm not getting the buy-in and the seat at the table here, I'm just going to go over here and have more of an impact. And a lot of design leaders want to cut design from their title, especially in the consulting world, because they just do not get the respect that product or other disciplines do.
That's interesting. So do you see that as part of the trend here, or part of what is driving the trend, that a design leader who's been, working through their career has suddenly come to the realization that they can't do great work if design is still in their title?
Yes. I'm seeing it as a trend from two angles, or two trends from different sides of the coin here. So from the design leader side, they want to move into product because they feel they can get more respect and all this kind of stuff. But from the company's perspective, and I call this like the vanity search, they still are more hesitant to hire a design leader into a product role because they are literally looking for like 3 roles down. They've done exactly the role that they want this person to go into. And so as my role as a recruiter, matchmaker, whatever we call ourselves, is to really educate the client on what this design person can bring to the product role. And actually it goes deeper than just hiring that person, but figuring out what do they actually need in that product role, looking at the whole ways of working and all that kind of stuff. That's what I love to get into. I don't just do here's Doug, he'll be great, go and speak to him. It's actually figuring out, do you really need a product person, a technical product person, when you've already got 3 IC product people who can do the technical side? Do you actually maybe need more creativity in that product role? This person's done it, not necessarily on their title, but they've done this because da-da-da-da-da. And so that more thoughtful way of approaching hiring is also what we need desperately in this industry. Desperately. I think recruiters actually have a very important role to play in improving ways of working internally and helping companies really elevate design. Because I don't think always the person they think they want isn't actually the person they need. I can give an example of one recently. Was doing a head of design search. It took about 3 months, but it took about a month to really figure out what that company needed. And what they thought they needed at the start was wildly different. It's basically the opposite person. There's also another thing around assessments as well of leaders going into organizations, because often what I find is design leaders who come in to leadership teams, you can't have the same personality traits as the wider team. You need to be bringing something unique and different, and they need to be open to that. So there's a lot more that goes to exec search than just, oh, here's Doug, he'll be great for Booking.com because he works at Expedia. There's a lot more to it.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually why I'm incredibly passionate about what I do, is because for me, it's a lot more than just you'll be great because you worked here kind of mentality. Yeah. I'm looking at assessments of leaders from a personality standpoint and how they're actually going to fit into the leadership team, and do an assessment of the leadership team. So I think that's very underutilized.
Tell me about your background and what kind of brought you to this point. You're building this independent practice. What's the journey?
Yeah, so I got into design recruitment at quite a young age. Must have been about 20. I actually just fell into recruitment. No one grows up and goes, "Oh, I want to be a recruiter." It doesn't happen. And end up in finance recruitment. But the guy who owns that practice also had design. And so my first boss is actually now a design director. He was a recruiter. And so I learned about design from like day one, and we were going out and meeting, these chief design officers and stuff. And I just fell in love with the approach that designers have on not only their work, but life in general. And from there, I've just, built my reputation from placing junior, mid, senior leads. So I did that for about 4 years. And then I actually set up my own design consultancy called Fearless with my business partner at the time. It started as a recruitment, so building teams. And then one client said to us, "Well, do you want to actually do the work as well and hire your own teams and do the work because you know design? Just come and do it." And so we ended up doing that and scaled it to about 65 designers at its peak. We were like the largest supplier for one of the largest energy companies in the world, and finance and automotive. It was really, really fun. I have quite a unique background in terms of I can sell design and execute design projects. And so I have a bit more of a insider knowledge of what good looks like. I kind of realized though that I love design, but I love the people side more. So I really enjoy finding the right talent for the right organizations and building community around that. The thing that I'm going into the new year with is there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of frustrated designers out there. There's a lot of frustrated companies out there that can't utilize design correctly. And I think it stems from having the right people at the right place at the right time. And so I want to do my bit to get us there and think of recruitment in a thoughtful, intentional way.
That's executive design recruiter Tom Scott. In the second half of this episode, you're going to hear a portion of the interview Tom conducted with me for his new podcast, Verified Insider. In this preview of Verified Insider, Tom asks me about the emerging career paths for future design leaders.
The most mature design practices I see have disciplines within design: service design, UX, product design, UI, motion. Say in 10 years' time, someone starts their career now in digital product design, X focused. Can they actually become a chief design officer? Because a chief design officer is someone that understands design as a whole: physical design, graphic design, digital product design. So if they're too focused on a digital product, can they then become wider?
With intent. That's another condition of the profession right now, is that we have these very deeply cut channels of practice. And there is the expectation, if you're starting out your career in one of these big or small or mid-sized companies as a designer, in all likelihood, you are going to have to commit to an area of practice that is very specific. You're going to be accountable and measured on your ability to deliver in that very deeply cut skill set and practice area. And so what does that mean if we look ahead to 5, 8, 10, 12 years ahead for that designer as they are beginning to move through their career? How do they gain that breadth of experiences and skills to step eventually into a true chief role where they have to be fluent in all of design and business and finance and marketing and all of these? How does that designer then travel those intervening years?
That's where coaching, there'll be a lot of more courses pop up. There's a ton of courses around to get designers get people into the design industry, but there's not as much at like head of level to learn more around the practice. That's my hunch anyway. For example, someone has started in a head of role, they're now the head of design. What tactical steps can they take to start integrating design? So often they're coming in, someone's hired them, they're not really sure what this person does. They know they need it, but they don't truly know what they need. What are the steps they can take straight away? What are the first 100 days?
They need to listen, first of all. There are a lot of clues in the way we design that can be adopted as we step into these leadership roles. When we are designing a new product or a new service, what are the things that we need to do? We need to understand the market, the environment that we're building for. We need to understand the user in a very human way. We need to build a team. So you take these ways of doing design and you say, okay, I'm a new leader. I've just stepped into this new leadership role. What should I be doing? There must be some leadership-y things that I need to be doing. No, what you need to be doing is being a designer and doing all of the things that you would be doing as a good designer. But the thing that you're designing is program, a practice, a team. And so you're applying all of those same things. You are getting out into the company and getting to know the users, the stakeholders, your peers across the company. You're listening very carefully and understanding what the needs are of that business. In 100 days, you need to have a point of view, and you need to tell that point of view. Again, being a designer, you need to tell a story in a very compelling way. That's part of what we do. If you're a good designer, you're good at telling stories. So get out there and tell your story and tell it in a really compelling way so that company that understands why you're there and what you're hoping to accomplish and why it matters to that business.
Would you say there's any red flags in the hiring process that design leaders should be aware of? Things like having the correct sponsorship, the right reporting lines. Obviously, it's subjective. So, is there any general themes that you're seeing?
I mean, I find that when I see a posting for a head of design, let's say, on whatever job board, the farther down you read, the more you learn. And the first paragraph or so, maybe 2 paragraphs, are usually pretty solid. And then things start to get a little wobbly the deeper you get down, because some of these things are revealed. What are the reporting lines? How organizationally is design placed in the company? How many steps away from true leadership are you, and why? And a lot of things are revealed when you begin to understand that. And those are always the first questions that when I'm talking to somebody about a new role, that is the thing that I need to come out of that first conversation understanding what the reporting lines are, what the thinking is, like why is design positioned? If design is reporting into engineering in this particular company, that's usually not a great sign to me, but I'll usually give them the benefit of the doubt. There's a really great reason for that. Tell it to me. But if it's just some arbitrary, this person didn't have enough people reporting to them, so they drew the short straw, that's not a good reason. There are these roles, and very often are pretty thin, and we need to be careful about that.
Absolutely. Other things that could be seen as red flags in the hiring process are things like having your own budgets or having access to a budget to do things, not just hiring, but tools. Do you see that as a challenge? Because there's still quite a lot of chief design officers who don't have their own.
Yeah, they don't have a P&L. Tooling is a great example of what we need to be able to control, because we know that designers require a set of tools that is very specific to their needs, and that is also changing all the time. So we need to have the ability to, and the agency to direct that. I also think of to take that course or go to that conference or get that certification in whatever skill area has emerged. That is going to be it already is, but you look ahead for the next 3 years and all of the technological changes that we're already experiencing and that we're going to continue experiencing, if I, as a design leader, can't help my design teams and my designers advance their skills, hampers my ability to deliver for the company, because I'm dealing with a team that is just not equipped to do the work anymore.
So we've been in the role for 100 days. How can you then start measuring your success to get stakeholders such as CFO, CTO, Chief Digital Officer, excited and start to get more buy-in?
It's important in those first 100 days to begin planting the seeds for what you will be measuring beyond that, getting a baseline across different metrics, whether it's user sentiment metrics and however the company is measuring that. There are lots of different ways, obviously, CX measurement and NPS scores and however they've been documenting this. And then looking at other ways that you can be measuring. I'm a big fan of how cross-functional teams, how fast they operate. So velocity is something that you can begin measuring. And before you're measuring it, you need to get a baseline. So looking at X number of teams and saying, okay, let's start taking a look at how long it takes you to get from inception to delivery. You also need to, in that listening tour, in that getting to know your user and your stakeholders aspect of the first 100 days, really listening for how those cross-functional leaders, what they value and how they measure success. And how can you begin setting up your teams to speak that language so that when you have access to them on whatever it is, a monthly basis, quarterly basis, you are showing up and you are speaking their language, and you are not requiring them to translate from your language of design into their language of whatever it is. So really understanding, okay, this particular leader, this is how they're measuring the strength of their business. I need to plug into that so that they can consume it.
It's almost trying to help them understand the value you can bring for the company tomorrow through design in a way that's going to help them, enable them, make them look good. Why do you think some designers struggle with that? There's this whole topic around we need a seat at the table. It's been around for a long time. But then someone said to me once, everyone wants a seat at the table. They get there, they then don't know what to say.
Yeah, there's a few reasons for this. One of our flaws as designers is that we feel like we have to reinvent everything. That if we show up to that table, we're already looking around and saying, this table sucks. We need a different table. We need a cooler table. I've got an idea for what kind of table we need here. So that same thing, like when we show up into that new role and we're looking around and listening and understanding how that company and how those leaders are measuring their business, we're already thinking, that's stupid. I could do that so much better. The fact is, they're already speaking that language. And if you're going to try and reinvent that, you're making it so much more difficult for yourself, as opposed to coming in with empathy, with humility, with curiosity, these 3 core qualities of design, empathy, humility, curiosity, and saying, okay, I'm picking up on how you're talking to each other and how you're presenting your ideas to each other, how you're reporting on the business to each other. I can design a way for my team to fit into that environment. That is how we need to be showing up, as opposed to coming in and saying, we've got to redesign everything.
Do you also think it's due to the fact that there's a lot of inflated titles out there and people who don't necessarily understand what a true design executive looks like are hiring people who aren't exec level, and then obviously they're coming in and then they can't operate at this level, and so they're slightly out of their depth, and in a nice way, you're not trying to the bus, but do you think that's also an issue you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. We touched on this a moment ago, that the pipeline just isn't strong enough yet. We don't have enough leaders who have gone through enough of this journey in a serious enough way to do the job yet. That's not judging any individual leader. That's just where we are. And that will change. That will evolve. I did a talk in Munich a few months ago. It was a group of about 250 people. And I asked for how many people were in a job right now where they were the first person to ever have that job. In other words, it's a brand new job. The company has never had a whatever of whatever that they're doing. And 80% of the people rose their hand. That was a very non-scientific study, but it's an indicator that this is all so new. And if you're in a job where you were the first person to ever have that job at that company, part of what that means is there is no template, not only for you as that leader, but for the company, for the person you're reporting to, for the HR and the recruiting team that hired you. If that's the case across all of these companies, how could they possibly know what they're needing and who's the right person to fill that role? That's just where we are right now. That's just where we are.
Yeah. So moving to the other side, say you're speaking to a CEO or a non-design executive, what advice would you give them on how they can measure the success of their design leader?
They need to be asking for certain things that most CEOs or most business leaders are not asking for. If they understand design even a little bit more than they do, then they would be asking for the evidence of that good design is happening. For instance, they would be asking for, how many prototypes did you build in the last month? What did you learn from those prototypes? Then how fast were you able to iterate on the original prototype and make something new and test that? So this notion of that iterative cycle of prototyping, testing, learning, iterating, as a CEO, if I'm realizing, hey, I need more of that happening in my company, and designers are the ones who do it, I want to ask for the evidence of that. I want the evidence of that to be showing up in how these product teams are reporting to me. So that's one way. Show me the prototypes. Give me the data that shows me that you are experimenting on a regular basis. And that experimentation is part of the ingrained way of working for your team. How many users are we in touch with? What are we learning from that? And what is the evidence that those insights that we're learning from real users are getting into the product? Show me that evidence. That's something that a good design team should be able to say, hey, CEO, we heard this really important thing 60 days ago in a user research session, and we responded to that. We built a prototype. We put it back out there. We learned something. We did a bunch of iteration, et cetera, and here it is in the product now. And now we're beginning to see that it is improving whatever user sentiment metrics we're tracking. That whole journey then, as a leader, I want to be seeing that happen, and I want to see the evidence of it.
That is a perfect segue into the next topic.
That's executive design recruiter Tom Scott in a preview of his new podcast, Verified Insider. As always, I hope you'll like and follow This Is a Prototype on your favorite podcast platform, and I hope you'll do the same for Tom's new podcast as it rolls out in the weeks ahead. Tom is an excellent follow at LinkedIn, if you don't already follow him there, where he'll be posting new episodes of Verified Insider as it rolls out. Special thanks to Scott Leach of Brandspeak Communications for his production assistance, and to Graham Barton for his original theme music. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn with your ideas for future guests of This Is a Prototype. You can also find out more about my work as a design leader on my website, dougpowell.design. Thanks for listening. I'll speak to you again soon.